Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Coolbaugh. Today, I have with me a very special guest, Herman Steuernagel. Herman, how are you today?
I'm doing great, thank you. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Anytime. I totally almost messed up my own last name there. Like, I can feel my tongue sticking. I was just talking to Joseph about Schiller about this. I was like, oh man, this new weather just does not agree with being a podcast host, a coach, and a teacher. I'm so glad I'm not like a motivational speaker at the same time. I'd have to get somebody else.
Yeah, I commend you for for being able to talk all day. I'm definitely not used to
Oh,
it.
I had two things of tea today. I had a couple cough drops. I've been trying to really take care of my voice. Like for instance, tomorrow, I'll go into class and my co-teacher's been so great because he knows I love to interview people. And the kids will be all excited and everything, and it'll be Monday morning, and I'll just wait, and he's like, Mr. Kubal is not trying to lose his voice again like last school year. So you guys really need to relax and let him talk. So he's been
Yeah,
definitely helping
perfect.
me out, and I have really good kids this year. So hopefully we keep it going. All
Yeah,
right. Well,
that's
I'm so glad
fantastic.
that we could have you on, Herman. Like I said, I did find you on TikTok, and I did have you, as a potential guest. I was going to invite for season 3. So kind of feel like this is serendipitous. I was like, when you messaged me from Joseph's, Facebook comment on that group, I'm like, gosh, his name sounds so familiar. And then when the press kit came through and I saw Eclipse, I'm like, that's why he sounds familiar because I had him down for Eclipse for potential
Yeah,
3. Yeah. So I thought that was super, super funny. So I'm so glad we could
yeah,
have
that's
you.
yeah, that's fantastic. And like I said, I'm surprised you found me on TikTok because not many people do.
A
So
lot of people come
that's
on.
fantastic.
A lot of people come on and say that, Herman, but you'd be
Yeah.
surprised the links I will go to find a fantasy, horror, sci-fi, dystopian, you name it. If it's not, if it's not nonfiction or just pure fiction, I will find that person has some sort of, sci-fi or fantastical or horror elements. I feel like I'm looking under, bricks and traveling to dark caverns of social media, and I'm glad that now I'm starting to get some more people attached to my accounts. That way it's a little easier to invite people. But yeah, I definitely saw the
Absolutely.
TikTok. It was awesome. I've been following you for at least a couple of weeks now. I think it's been about 3 or 4 at this point.
Fantastic.
So yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, I've only been on TikTok for a few months, so
Oh,
that's
cool.
great that you found me. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. And I just for the audience too, for newer authors for social media for TikTok, I did hear that though, that for instance, somebody, such as you, I think I've been on since last winter. I got really bored.
Okay.
Might even be last fall. And now if I try and put something on, I really gotta try hard, to get those algorithms. But I have heard that if you have just started and you kind of blitzkrieg it with a lot of different content.
Mm,
I know a lot of authors who have done that. I know a lot of authors who have a private one and then do an author one, or sometimes they'll just change one letter in their author name and start a new one and then kind of go about
right.
that way. I have heard that, that definitely helps the algorithm out. So yeah, that's interesting that I found you in that way. So maybe that lends
Yeah.
a little credence to it. Well, Harmer, we'll go right there with that first question. What has your
Yeah,
writing journey
sure.
up until this point?
Yeah, so my writing journey, I mean, I've been writing ever since I can remember, really. I remember my first story as a kid. It was, about an owl who lost his hoot. It was kind
Awesome.
of just a fun little kid story, yeah.
That's
So,
cool.
I mean, I've always, loved writing and I went to, kind of grew up with, writing short stories. I'd never written anything, as long as a novel. It was kind of more short stories. I went to university and, actually got my degree in English,
Mhm.
kind of more focused, on literary fiction and that sort of thing more than creative writing. Um, and it wasn't actually until 2019 when I decided, to take the leap and write a novel. Um, it's funny that I never thought I could write a novel. I kind of, kept putting it off. It was one of those things, yeah, maybe one day I'll do it. Um, in 2019, I kind of switched careers a little bit. I kind of ran my own web design business and kind of decided running a business wasn't really what I wanted to do. So I switched. I'm still doing web design after that, but kind of more just an employee role. So I had this extra time on my hands. Um, and so kind of in the fall of 2019, I had some friends that convinced me to run a half marathon with them, which I never ran. I was always a kid that got picked last in gym, and I just decided, well, yeah, that I'll do something stupid with my friends. Like I'm willing to do that. So, and had the extra time now to train. I needed something to keep myself busy. And I promise this relates to, my running journey, even though it sounds like it like running. Um, but like so I went from basically couch to half marathon in, about 3 months.
Wow.
Managed to do it. Yeah, like yeah, I think I literally started I hadn't run 5K in August, and um I ran, the 20K, 21K in October. Like it was that like literally couch couch to
Yeah,
half
yeah,
marathon.
yeah. That's crazy.
So the funny thing was, afterwards, after I'd done it, I had people coming up to me and were like, congratulations, way to, cross something off your bucket list. And I just thought to myself, off my bucket list, that wasn't on my bucket list. Kind of did it. So, it was kind of about that time, and a few other, things came across my path where I was like, maybe I should actually do something that is on my bucket list, and write that novel I've always been meaning to do. Like I have the time now, so let's do it. Um, and I had really no direction as far as anything as other than, well, I'm gonna just write this book. So I kind of took the year from then, and of course, this was the fall of 2019 that I started doing this. In March 2020, COVID kind of happened, so it freed up a little bit more extra time for me. um I mean, I was fortunate with my day job. I still was working, but I was working from home, so I gained a little bit of extra time. We weren't going out and doing things in the evening and whatnot. So yeah, so it was pretty much a solid year. And I had my first book, Lies the Guardians Tell, published in December of 2020. And that was really what got me going. So since then, I've written 6 more books, and yeah, it's been a journey.
That's pretty prolific for, for just a couple years, 6 books. And, we talk about that a lot. I don't think a lot of people, really realize, like how many books six is,
Yeah,
I mean, we try to express that to people, and most people are like, oh, well, that's cool. And you're like, no, I wrote 6 books though in 2 years. uh,
yeah. I mean, the time frame, right? Like, and it's funny, that first. I mean, like I said, the first one took me a year, and then once I had one written, it's kind of you pass a mental hurdle. It's like, I can, it's kind of. I mean, it's the same way with running. Once I had passed, 20K, I looked at a 10K. I was like, yeah, I can do that. Like, I know I can do it. I've done it before. So, same kind of mentality with writing. Once I'd written that first book, I'm like, yeah, I can do this again.
Sorry, I gotta
So
try to take some notes. I'm gonna write that down.
yeah.
I didn't think about that, but you are right. That like mental aspect really does make a lot
Yeah,
of sense. Yeah.
yeah, and that's, that really, when I started writing, and well, even now, a lot of what, because I'm a podcast listener, and I listen to a lot of podcasts. So when I started running, I started listening to running podcasts, and really started to, hone into the mindset of, visualization, and you're able to do more than your brain tells you can do. So um, it's really a lot of the same processes in running as writing, even though it's not, as physical of an activity. A lot of it's just, mindset, and not letting your brain tell you can't do it. So yeah, I was able to, push through kind of using some of the same, visualizations, and just not, let those times when it's tough stop you, because that's what your brain wants, right? Your brain wants
Yeah,
to
yeah,
not let you do it, or tell you can't do it if time gets tough, right? So yeah.
yeah. No, I definitely understand that. People ask me, they're like, how do you write? And I'm like, well, I'm a martial artist. I'm got multiple black belts in Taekwondo. I'm like, I've done several others. I forget. I think I'm ranked in like 4 other martial arts now. And it's like, at this point, it's just about the process. I
Yeah.
love learning, and you know, I'm working on my black belt for karate, and that's always been a lifelong goal. And then I'll probably go back to some other things. But yeah, it's like once I got that first one, I was like, oh yeah, and all the steps,
Yeah.
right? And the
Right.
ups and the downs. So I always liken that to writing, and I'm like, well, if I
Yeah.
can do this and physically get beat up by people for like, more than half my life at this point, I think I could, sit down at a computer and do it, in my head, to somebody else and, make them.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of a lot of it's finding about finding that rhythm too, right? Like when I was running, I'd get to a certain point. I'm like, okay, I just have to keep doing this for, you don't have to like, you just have to, convince your brain that, I'm already doing this. I just have to not stop.
Yeah.
And sometimes writing is the same way. Like it's just getting in the groove of putting the words down and not letting your brain stop and want to check Facebook or check, Instagram or whatever else. It's a lot of it's just the mindset of, let's keep this rhythm happening.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And just
Uh,
like going out in the cold and running. Sometimes like today's like kind of, I don't know, I felt like it was like a weird day. Like there's certain things in the news and stuff that were going on, and um yeah, like one of my icons unfortunately passed away. One of
mm,
my lifelong heroes, and I was just like, I don't feel like writing today. And then
yeah.
I'm like, but I have to, because then somebody shared a TikTok of him literally saying, like about him talking pursuing your dreams and things. So I was like, well, the best thing to do is to sit down in the chair today, and to get some writing done.
Yeah.
And it was a very poetic experience, I guess. But yeah, like my buddy mentioned that the other day. He's like, I was like, "What'd you do? What'd you do this week?" He goes, "I broke my hand." I'm like, "Oh, okay." I'm like, "Well, how are you gonna write?" He's like, "I just been writing with my right hand."
Oh
And
wow. Wow, that's
you know what I mean? And
dedication.
I'm like, well, if he could do that, I'm like, I should be, so I got in
Yeah,
this
no
chair.
excuse. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like typing away, and it wasn't good, but I did it, and that's how I think it's a great analogy. I think sometimes that's how I feel after running, because I'm like, well, it wasn't great, but I did
Definitely.
it. So
Exactly. Yeah, and you feel so much better once it's done, right? And you're like, I'm glad
yeah,
I did that, right? Rather than
yeah.
having to think all day about, oh, should I or shouldn't I, right? Just like, get it over with and get it done.
Yeah, amen to that. Well, I've been breaking mine, and I was just talking about this recently, and a couple people said that helped them out. So I'll mention it again. Where I was listening to this one podcast, and like I said before we got recorded, I listen to way too many. So like you, I like motivational ones. So I was listening to this one like motivational slash workout one while I was at the gym, and this guy was like, "Yeah, I break everything down that I don't want to do in 20-minute increments." He's
Mm.
like, but I do it every day. He's like, so I like running, I'll run for 20 minutes. I'll stop. He's like, I sometimes I'll keep going, but sometimes I'll just stop, and he wrote a book, and he was like, I just sat down, wrote for 15 to 20 minutes every day. And I'm like, man, like, and I've been
Yeah,
starting to do that more and more with different things. So I think that,
right,
like any progress is progress, so I think a lot
right,
of people think it's got to be I tell my students that all the time. I'm like, just improve one thing today. Don't
right.
you want to try and improve 10 things, like feel free, but really just got to work on that one thing. So I think that's
Yeah.
in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's so easy to look at the big picture of something and get overwhelmed. Like, oh,
Yep, that's
I'm
great.
writing a novel. How am I gonna write a novel? Well, you don't have to write a novel right now. Write
Yep.
a page, right? Yeah, like you said, sit down and write for 15 minutes. And a little bit of consistent effort over time adds up to a lot, right? So um
Yeah.
that's really there's no other way to write a book than one page at a time. So don't worry about 300 pages. Just you just got to write one right now, or even a paragraph right now, right? So
Yeah. Well, it's
definitely.
funny that you mentioned that because oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember if I was listening to Joe Abercrombie. I thought it was Joe Abercrombie. I could have swore it was him for his first book, where I could have swore it was him that rode on the train, or like the trolley. And I think he had like 35, 40 minutes. And like, that's just like what he did. I heard a couple other people, same thing. And I'm like, yeah, 30 minutes when you really break it up, even if you do two writing sprints, it really isn't that long. Once you start getting into
Yeah.
it, it really goes really quick. So yeah,
Yeah, and I'll find I'm more productive in a 30-minute sprint than I am if I have 3 hours. This if you've got a dedicated 30 minutes, it's sometimes you can because you only have this amount of time to do it, right?
Yep.
So
Yep. Well, that's what my buddy, he was like, how are you gonna write with the kid around? I was like, I think he's gonna make me more productive, because anytime like I'm right now, I'm not in season. I don't know. I feel like I'm less productive right now than I was in the fall. In the fall, I had everything down to a science, and I actually got more written than now. I'm like, oh, I can do it later. I could do it tomorrow. And
Yeah.
I've been lazy this
Yeah.
month, and it sucks because it's, NaNoWriMo. But yeah, I think doing those increments, I've been trying to train myself really to do the writing sprints, even, 10 minutes, and just get 3 of them, per day.
Yeah.
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 And just get
Oh,
it,
that's a good way to do it.
yeah, just get it in when you can get it in, just
That's right. Yeah.
story of our lives, right? So for the second question there, what genres do you currently write in, and how did you choose those?
Yeah, so I mean, right now I currently have multiple flavors of science fiction, as I like to like to call it. I've got a I've got a kind of a wide sci-fi dystopian series. I've got an apocalyptic thriller, again sci-fi series, and then my newest book here, Eclipse, that just will have come out, is more of a space adventure. So I mean, I grew up on sci-fi. It's something that's always been a part of who I am. And I grew up watching Star Trek: The Next Generation with my dad.
Yeah,
That's something that as long as I can remember, sci-fi has been always been something that's captivated me. So between sci-fi and I kind of came into fantasy a little later on after that, but science fiction was just I can't imagine writing anything outside of either sci-fi or fantasy to be honest. If it doesn't have a little bit of either magic or something a little fantastic, then it's doesn't take you out of this world, which I think a lot of us reading those genres really enjoy those elements of something something a little different than what the day to day is. So yeah, so when I first started writing, like I said, Liza Guardian Style is my first book. A bit of a YA dystopian um series. And I was telling you before the show, it's or before we started recording, it's got a little bit of a fantasy element to it. I've had reviewers say it kind of reads more like an epic fantasy. And that kind of I do read an epic fantasy as well, so that kind of played into that as well. I think I was still reading Wheel of Time when when I was writing that. So those elements play into it. It's a hero's journey, and that's kind of typical for the epic fantasy, right? So
yeah,
so yeah, so I guess I mean, long story short, to answer your question, it's something that's a genre that has always been inspiring to me. I love thinking about what we might be able to do,
oh
where
yeah,
what our current circumstances, where things are leading, and yeah, and just imagining what might be.
yeah, yeah. Well, my friend made a good point. She said when I interviewed her, way back in the beginning of season 1, where she was like, well, she was, I like both. She was, I like fantasy because she's like, even though if it's set in a different world, she's like, it's usually, in the past. And
Mm,
she's like, and sci-fi is looking to the future. And she's like, it's nice to have, both of those, which you can go one way or the other for a different flavor, different adventure
absolutely.
as well. And I'm like, that's a really good way to state that. Uh, yeah, but I mean, same thing. I mean, growing up with Star Trek, oh my gosh, I was just looking at Roku for free. The channel does Farscape,
Mm,
Sliders.
yeah,
I mean, like I feel like 70s to like 90s were just like some of the best, sci-fi
yeah,
out.
absolutely.
And then
You got like the Stargate and
oh,
all that
Stargate. Yeah,
sort
I
of
was just
stuff,
about to
right?
say
Yeah.
that. Yeah. You got so many great shows that came from, from that time period. And then you had all the, the subsequent ones and things like that. And then now I kind of like it now
Yeah.
because I feel like people like us, like we pull from those great, particularly science fiction,
Mhm.
elements. And I think yeah, I think that's what's nice about sci-fi for me is like I grew up on Sequest, Stargate,
Yeah.
SG-1, X Files. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh,
We must have been watching the same
yeah.
channels at the same
Oh
time,
my
right?
gosh, the Sci-Fi Channel. I was just
Yeah.
talking to some students about this. They're like, "Why do you?" I'm like, my grandpa. He actually got me into. He's really big into westerns, really big into martial arts. Like not
Okay.
himself, but he loved watching it. But like we would watch, which I never realized till later. We watched a lot of sci-fi. I mean, a lot of sci-fi. I watched the original Battlestar Galactica with him.
Yeah.
Buck Rogers. Just if it was sci-fi, he loved it. But
Right.
we watched a lot of, like the TV version of Conan.
Okay.
And a lot of things like that. And he was the one to show me Beastmaster 2. Just a lot of great. My mom said recently, she goes, he ruined you. She was like, there's no way you're doing anything besides fantasy and sci-fi,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
yeah, like history is another one. Like, I mean, he had me watching all these history documentaries by like age 4. So my mom's like, that's all you do are those 3 things. So, yeah, it's just, what a
That's
great time.
fantastic.
Yeah, well, my buddy and I we were both having children, and really soon, within the next couple of months, and we're making a list of like movies, video games that they have to play, movies they have to watch,
Mm.
and things like that. So we were having a really good time, going back and forth. Of course, like Alien,
Yeah,
Close Encounters, Predator, and I'm like, just so many cool ideas. Like it's kind of crazy to think of
absolutely.
how many neat movies, and things and TV shows and stuff like that. Power Rangers,
Yeah,
Galaxy Quest with Tim Allen. I mean, just a lot of.
right.
Well, that's super cool. I have to say, I love seeing your covers, by the way.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
they all look really, really good. I'll try and save that question for a little later, but they look really good
Yeah, no
behind me.
problem.
I'm jealous. I want to flip my desk around by next year so I can have mine behind me. My wife's like, it's going to be weird because your desk can be in the middle of the floor. I'm like, well, then people, when they come down the stairs, they have to like check in with me to get into the library. That kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Well, I mean, it kind of worked out well. I actually just had these printed. I had a couple of signing events the last couple
That's
weeks,
cool.
so I had them kind of done up for that. So it's nice to have and nice to have a spot to put them.
Yeah.
I mean, as you can tell, I'm kind of in our kind of spare room here with the Peloton behind me and everything else. So, but it's a good spot.
That's okay. I'm slowly, with the baby coming, I'm slowly losing my giant man cave, and eventually I'm going to be in this like little office corner. But yeah, I definitely know that feeling. So the question that I am really excited to ask, I'm gonna pretend like I didn't look anything up online or anything, or check any of your websites or socials. But what is your
Yeah.
book Eclipse about, and how did you come up with this idea?
Yeah, so Eclipse. So yeah, my latest book, which when this comes out, will have just have released. So it's a space adventure. I mean, the premise of the book itself is, we're a couple hundred years in the future. Um, Climate change has basically devastated the world. Climate wars kind of destroyed, the rest and who was left, and kind of the remnants of people were. It was decided that they should be shipped off the planet and you know, put into space stations circling the Earth, basically to into a survival habitat. um, at the time too, we've had kind of a space program. So other people were living on Mars and the Moon and that sort of thing at the time. So, but the people who are in the space stations, and I feel like I'm rambling a little bit here,
Oh no.
but those who are in the space stations, they were led, their kind of ancestors, but at this time, their ancestors kind of decided that to keep the peace in the space stations, they weren't allowed to know that there was anybody else outside of the space stations, just so that they wouldn't, kind of riot and rebel. So these people have been led to believe that they're the only ones left of humanity.
Oh,
What they don't know is that there are some people still living on Earth who didn't leave. The elites kind of took over the few places that were still habitable, and aren't allowing anyone back onto the
oh.
planet. Yeah. So that's the setup. So the book itself then follows two protagonists. There's Django, who lives on one of the space stations, and there's Mika, who's a former space pirate who is kind of turned into a contractor who's shipping goods, kind of in between spaceports and space bases and the moon colonies and that sort of thing. Um, so yeah, so oh, sorry, it looked like you had a
Sorry,
question
I couldn't help but
there.
laugh because like I said, like I grew up on sci-fi. I grew up reading sci-fi, and it's funny now I've read a lot of fantasy, but I think it's because I've encountered so much sci-fi. I got like a weird relationship with writing. It's almost hard for me to write. I think I'm a more natural writer with fantasy, but I absolutely love the space pirate. Like I that is like a trope. Like there were a couple of indie books that I read the last couple of years where they were like, I didn't even get to line 3. They were like blah 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 space pirate. I bought it and read it and loved it. It's
Yeah.
one of those, when you say tropes bring you in, they are talking about me. Like if it's a
Yeah.
space pirate, I am so there. It's not even funny. So
Right. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, me too. It's a fun concept to play with, right? So I mean, with that point of view, so she kind of, Mika was like I said, was a former space pirate turned contractor. There's a few incidents in her past that, um, made her kind of decide that she needed to find a little bit more of a legitimate trade.
mm,
Her mother got sick. She needed to take care of her mother, and she had some guilt associated with that. So when her storyline opens in the book, another space pirate has tracked her down and basically tells her that she needs her help. And from there, Mika's life kind of spirals out of control, and that's kind of where I'll leave that because that's where kind of where the story opens with her plot line.
mm.
Django, on the other hand, like I said, he's kind of a farmer on one of the space stations. And a glitch in the software of the space station kind of reveals the viewport and the true view of what's outside of the station. Um, and basically, as a result, his entire family is killed in what has been called a hull breach in the station. And then his uncle informs him that it wasn't actually a hull breach, but they've been lied to, and what he saw outside was the truth. So he has to go on a journey of discovery and find out what's really going on. So their paths kind of we kind of follow each of their journeys a little separately, and it kind of goes from there.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I like that. A lot of conflict there. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot going on, but it's really setting the stage for kind of a bigger scene. So yeah.
I like that. I like how you took the space farmer trope too, and you just kind of
Yeah.
turned it around and made it really unique. That's really cool. Oh, that's
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, so where, and I think you asked where I got the idea from it.
yeah.
It's a funny thing because I wrote a short story, kind of a sister short story to it called Infinity, which is available on my website for as a free download. But I wrote it for a short story anthology that came out last year, and really, I kind of started out with just a mental image of basically the space station and a viewport flicking off and showing something that wasn't that what that hadn't been something you'd ever thought of happening before, and then flicking back off and wondering what the heck just happened.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was the visualization that kind of started it, and I wrote the short story. I was like, no, there's a really interesting universe happening here.
Mm.
So I just felt the need to expand it, and it kind of turned into a series. So mhm.
Oh, my friend, if I could tell you how many of my short stories are novellas, my friend always
Yeah.
teases me, like, I got a novella idea. He goes, I look forward to reading your next trilogy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what this turned into. So the plan is for a set of three books,
Oh,
and we'll
cool.
kind of see how it goes from there. Yeah. Yeah, so Eclipse will be out now, but by the time this comes out, I'm currently, as we speak, about a third to halfway done the first draft of book two.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's coming along. Yeah.
See, I told you he was fast, guys. Oh, that's awesome. Well, I look forward to reading Eclipse. I have to say, I absolutely loved the cover. Like when I was scrolling through TikTok, that was like the thing that really
Hmm.
stuck out to me,
Yeah.
like right away. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. I was thinking
Yeah,
back
my
to,
cover designer did such an amazing job with it.
yeah,
I
yeah,
I
incredible.
you know I could he it came back and I was just floored. I was like, no, you nailed it. Like that's um I'm really happy with how it turned out.
Yeah, like I mean, I used to teach. Everyone always like, ooh, and ah, but I taught design because nobody else would do it, and I had an art background. I really originally was going to be an illustrator. My mom's an interior designer, so I feel like I got a pretty good eye from her. Um, mainly, years of dressing myself wrong. But I love the color scheme there, though. And for our audience who's on audio or YouTube, you just have to go to the description and check out Eclipse. But yeah, those colors like really, really pop. I mean, the blue that's down there, for the planet, and I just think once you go to like the purple and then you get like the pinks and reds, I mean, I feel like it really draws your eye. I really like how
Yeah,
your
thank you.
title, the lettering for your title, I feel like that's so sci-fi. I like how
Yeah,
your name too at the bottom. I mean, sorry, I'm assuming here, but they placed
yeah,
everything. So, totally, um, yeah, there was something else I was gonna say. Oh, I really like how, I feel like there are a lot of sci-fi books where the ship is actually faced to the right. I don't
right.
know why that like is a thing. If that was like, a design thing that a lot of people do. But I like how yours is actually going to the left. It
Go on the
just,
left. Yeah, that's true.
yeah,
Yeah.
it looks a lot different, but in a good way. And I think it makes it a little bit more unique for the genre. But who
Right.
did your cover?
Covers by Christian. I
Oh,
don't
okay.
know if you've seen, he's on Facebook and that sort of thing, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
he's a different cover designer than who I've used for my previous books, but he just knocked it out of the park. It's a new universe, new series for me, so I really wanted something to just stand out, and he nailed it. So yeah, I get so many compliments on this cover, so I'm really
Yeah,
happy how it turned out. Yeah.
that's terrific. Sorry, I jumped the gun there. I was trying to ask you who did
Nope.
your cover, and I already knew who did your cover. I
No, it's all good. Yeah.
sometimes I forget. But yeah, I get geeky about the book covers. I love art. Yeah, but I thought that was
Yeah.
great. Who did your other book covers?
Mibble Art. They're a company based out of the Ukraine. Yeah, so they did a great job. Yeah, like I said, it was just a new universe for me. I just kind of wanted to take a step out in a different direction. So yeah, they did a great job with my previous covers. I have
Yeah,
nothing
yeah.
bad to say about them either. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm glad, my buddy and I we really narrowed it down, I think, to them, honestly.
Okay.
You're
Yeah.
one of several authors that, have really had like I don't like to like look them up. I like to find people whose covers I really enjoy and then
Yeah.
find out, who, and I do recommend this to audience members too, like find people whose books you want to pick up. Like
Definitely.
when I do sci-fi eventually, which will be in the next couple of years. Hopefully, I can get it together. I mean, Christian did an amazing job, so that would be
Yeah.
somebody I would try to go after and get to do
Yeah,
my.
he was someone I was following for, basically since I started. And I mean, he's a bit pricier,
Yeah,
obviously,
yeah, yeah,
than
yeah.
Miblard is. So, that's why I kind of held off on booking him. But like I said, a new series, I thought, no, now's the time to get him. So yeah,
Yeah,
and he blew away. I mean, I had high expectations, and he blew those away. So yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's so hard too. I mean, there's I don't want to dissuade anybody. I think that, like write what you want to write, but
Yeah,
for covers for sci-fi, I feel like it's so hard to make yourself stand out. And
yeah,
particularly with the outer space, the type of cover, that he did for you. I mean, it's really hard to stand out there. And that one to me, like, I
yeah,
mean, I had looked at a lot of sci-fi. So I'm trying to find more sci-fi authors to come on. It's just apparently I'm always in these fantasy circles. I'm like, no, I love sci-fi. I'm like, I want more sci-fi authors to come. And like I said, I'm not very good at writing it. I love reading it though. So I want to, talk to more of you and figure out what's going on. But you
right.
were in quite a few algorithms for me for, for sci-fi authors. And that's where like I
Cool,
remember that
cool.
the day where I was like, dang, that is really cool. And that's, where I
Yeah,
added it to my potential list for season 3. But yeah, he did an
fantastic.
awesome job there. That's sweet.
Yeah, well, I won't give up on my TikTok then, since apparently it's doing something. So
I liked it. I mean,
yeah,
yeah, it's so this is what I do. Like when this episode comes out, all of your book covers will be I save and then I actually run them through TikTok. And even if the algorithm only gets like I think right now my last episode who would be Omaira Velez. She's current. I think it was like 350 people, but 350 people just look at that
yep.
TikTok, and who knows if she only gets 5 solid readers out of that, but that could be 5 readers that she'll have forever. Like, there's
That's
certain
right.
authors
Yeah,
I'll buy everything and then I'll buy them for my friends, then I'll buy the author.
yeah,
And then my wife hates it, but then I'll buy their paperbacks too. And
right.
send copies or Kickstarters or something like that. So you never
Yeah,
know.
yeah, and I've heard, some other authors talk about that too, because I mean TikTok's starting to become a pretty big thing for authors. And I mean, if you had, I mean, a lot, and some authors will say, well, I'm only getting 200-300 views. And I had
Per time.
another author say, if you were standing up in front of a room of 300 people, that'd be pretty good, right? Like
Yeah.
it's,
Yep.
it feels different when it's a number on your screen, and other authors might be getting, hundreds of thousands of views, but 300 people is 300 people. So you never know. Like, yeah, if you find that one fan, that'll follow you forever, right? So,
Yeah.
I'm happy to be on there. It's a different platform for me. It's taken some time to figure it out, but it's a fun place to be, and it's just yeah, I mean, you got to be careful not to waste your afternoon on it, but
Oh yeah.
it's
Yeah.
because the
Yeah.
algorithm is too good. It really is. It knows
Yeah.
what you want to see.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, when they're just like that's the only bad thing about me now is I'll be like, oh, I literally set a timer for myself, like in my head. I'm like, okay, 15 minutes, and then
Yeah.
now, like I said earlier, I just have too many book people, which is a good and bad problem to have. But I'll just be like, oh,
Yeah.
that's a really cool book, and I'm just like writing people down, or or saving stuff, or try to message people. So I think I need to go back to actually setting the physical timer. That way, I don't get too caught up. I mean, it could have been too bad. I found you on there, so hopefully it's the algorithm's working for all of us eventually.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
That's a
right.
good point you made, though. Yeah, if you could even reach 100 people per time,
Yeah.
I mean, eventually, and that's kind of what I was telling you before we got started with. I read that article where they're like, most people they want. Obviously, we all want to get on the TikTok or from, my goal for this podcast is for just one time, I want to share something for an author and have it get like 100,000 views.
Right. Yeah.
Just because I know that's going to help with their sales. Like that's the only thing I
Absolutely.
really want out of this podcast. Like I used to do it because I was one of those people where I was like, well, I don't want to ask for things because everybody in the community always asks for things.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I want to give something. And then now I just got so involved in all of your lives and I care about you. I'm like, okay, I just really want. And my buddy he goes, well, one of these days you have to ask for something. I'm like, yeah, one of these days. I'm like, for now though, that is my big goal. And if I could hit,
Cool.
like one of my friends got like 1.5 million views on TikTok, I'm like,
Right.
that's why I
Yeah.
do them. So this episode will be on there too. So if anybody wants to go on TikTok, follow me and Herman and, share it and like it. That'd be great. Make it blow up.
Absolutely. Yeah. That'd be
Yeah,
fantastic.
awesome. It's gonna make me so happy one of these days. So that fourth one there, when it comes to characterization, what do you find is the
Mhm.
most important to you as a writer and why?
Yeah, so I mean, for what I try to do with my characters is really give them a motivation for doing what they're doing. I have an indie author friend named his name is S.W. Miller. He writes urban fantasy, but he also does some nonfiction as far as writing goes. So I'll give him a shout out. But he talks about um, a character having a scar and a wound, um, or a wound and a scar, I guess, in the other order. So something that's happened to them that creates a scar, and from which it kind of creates their motivation for what they're doing. So for example, with I mentioned Mika a bit earlier in Eclipse, her wound is that she left to kind of be her mother to become a pirate, and in the meantime her mother got sick, and so when by the time she got back, her mother was basically on her deathbed, and she blames herself a lot for that. So it's kind of that was her motivation for becoming um a legitimate contractor. That was her motivation for starting a new life, and for a lot of the decisions that she makes. And then from there, it kind of you can kind of see what they desire and what they need out of that, and that really drives the plot forward for that character. Especially as I grow as a writer, I really try to have more character driven based plots rather than just action beat after action beat. I want there to be some sort of motivation for what my characters are doing. So that's really the most important thing to me is just that there's if they're a person, they have we all have things that drive us. We have reasons why we do the things we do. So especially when you're looking at um, stories that are on a grander scale, there needs to be a reason for the motivations or for the actions that they take. And for Mika as well, like she's got the her mother is kind of a smaller scale. That kind of drives her what she does for a lot of book one. She also had, at the same kind of time she had an accident. Um, she was I kind of briefly talked about it in Eclipse. It has more into play in book two, but she had a crew that died because of a mistake she made during a heist. as a pirate, and that really helped. She really holds some baggage because of that, and that drives a much wider arc for her. It's kind of something that she hasn't even admitted that she needs to deal with yet. So there are layers of things that drive us. It's not just one thing that in our past that you know drives what we do day to day. There's lots of things going on. So
Yeah.
I try to give my characters a little bit of depth as far as what purpose they have and why they decide to do what they do.
I just want
That
to
makes sense.
state, yeah, it makes total sense. I totally agree. I just want to state now for our audience, because this is coming out in February, I did not steal Herman's idea for motivation for his character for mine. Okay. It just happened to be that we as humans only have so many different motivations. So
You're right.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
funny that you said that. I have a character who has a similar motivation, with having a crew that, he was responsible for. Then things did not go well, and that's
Okay.
literally what drives him. I like how you said that. This is why I interview people. Um, and I'm sure people that have listened have been like, oh, well, some people might be like, oh, well, yeah, Herman said what, like, 4 or 5 other guests had said about motivation. But, and this is what I always tell my kids too in school, is they're like, oh, I can't say that my answer now. So and so already said it. I'm like, but what if you say it in a different way where we learn something new? And I
Right.
feel like how you just explained motivation makes a lot of sense, because we know characters need to be motivated. Like, we all know that. But what you just said is more making them more relatable and treating them like they're an actual person,
Right.
which is characterization in a nutshell, right? Making them feel
Yeah.
real. So I like what you did there. And I actually really like how you said and stated that answer. That makes me think differently about character
Mm.
motivation. Because I think a lot of people think
Right.
it's like, oh, they have to go get this thing, Like, I got
Yeah.
he's got to go get this thing. Well, no, it's not really about that. It's about
Yeah.
he goes and gets the thing and gets the protection, the money, gets a different life, tries to leave
Yeah.
past traumas behind. It's totally
Yeah.
different. And that's what we do, right, as people. So I think treating your characters like they're real people and finding out their
Yeah.
intrinsic motivations makes a
Yeah,
lot
for
of sense.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they might be they may be going to get, X thing, the whatever item it is that they're on a quest to get, but why is that important to them? Why do they want that? Why do they, yeah, everyone wants money, but there's a reason why, a lot of us want money. And it might be something simple. It doesn't have to be, some catastrophic event for them, but you're going to make your character a lot more relatable and believable if there's that driving force behind it, rather than, oh well, they're going to get the treasure because treasure's cool. Like
Yeah.
it is, but
Yeah.
it's not. That's not a very deep story, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, yeah, it makes you think back to, the Clive Cussler novels, with Dirk and everything. And my friend's like, I love the stories. He's like, I love the character. He's like, but sometimes I wonder what his motivation really is. Like,
Right.
and but I think Clive Cussler does a good job. And this was back, I think we were talking in high school, but as an adult now, with have reading Clive Cussler and and more importantly, analyzing as an author, I'm like, well, there's a lot of situations that he's pulled into, that give him different motivations. And
Yeah.
it could be preservation. Like, and I think my friend made a good point today. It's like Indiana Jones. He's like, he goes out after stuff all the time, but the thing that makes those movies great, I think, and I think he would agree, is that it's that motivation behind why Indy is trying to do this thing or find this thing. And I think even if
Yeah.
you have the two movies where it's like Raiders, and then Lost Ark, or Last Crusade, I mean, they're still trying to fight the Nazis, but there's completely different motivations behind that for him at that time, which I think also makes
Yeah.
sense, because we're all motivated differently at different times, in our
Yeah.
life. So I think that makes total.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's why they had to change the format of James Bond too. Like
Yup. Yup.
the old James Bond movies, it was just action scene after action scene, right?
Yep.
And, audiences got bored of that. So, when
Yeah.
it came to was it Casino Royale? That was the first one with
Yeah, Casino Royale, and why am I blanking on the second one? I love the
Yeah.
second one too. I
So
thought it was really good.
yeah, so I mean they gave Bond a bit more, they gave him a wound really
Yeah,
in that movie, and changed the format a bit, and it did, was the most successful Bond movie in ages because of that, right? So
yeah.
um they added a little bit of more depth of character to what they had done with Bond up until that point. Yeah.
Ryan made a good point. That's a good point. He's like, there's more gravitas after that. He's like, I felt like the stakes were higher. Like you knew he
Hmm.
was going to save the world or the country or whatever. But like, yeah, it felt like the stakes were higher. And yeah, I mean, his personal wounds definitely came out there. I think that was the thing though, is
Yeah.
that going back to your answer though, they made him more likable, I think, by giving him that wound. Uh,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, unless you had read sorry if anybody hasn't read James Bond, but if you hadn't read the books, you wouldn't know that, he had that wound, the
Yeah.
Pierce Brosnan and Sean Connery, James Bond, and particularly the Pierce Brosnan.
Yeah.
Not that he wasn't a great actor, great Bond, but yeah, I think those stories were, like you said, were meant to do a specific thing. But
Yeah, and like I said, yeah, there are action scenes which are fun, but at some point, what else do you do with that? Because you're just trying to make cooler action scenes, and
as in,
it just becomes repetitive, right? Because they don't have that motivation other than, you know, stopping the villain and saving the girl. But okay, well,
yeah. My friend literally said it at one point. Well, when we were discussing, it's funny that you mentioned that. I never realized this conversation that another writing friend and I had, but he's like, Dan, he's like, it's literally like opening action scene. We meet the villain. Bond does something cool, gets things from Q, meets the femme fatale, gets
yeah,
into trouble, and then it goes, it's literally like
yeah,
cookie cutter.
it's the same template over and
Yeah,
over.
yeah, same
Absolutely,
template. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Oh, that's really funny. Not that I didn't love Tomorrow Never Dies, guys. That's not.
No, no, absolutely. They were fun movies and they did what
Yeah,
they needed to do, but there's a reason why um the appetite for Bond movies, started to
yeah.
decline, right? Yeah.
Quantum of Solace. That was the second one, right? Quantum of Solace. Were they were in the
Yes, I
desert? I
believe
think that's.
so.
I could
Yeah.
not believe like well, and then my friend said he's like, well, it's hard to give him a. I don't know. He goes, I was impressed that they expanded upon the wound, and then I feel like every time they did that, like you just feel more and more bad for him. You keep going, and you just keep thinking like the stakes can't be higher, but somehow, from a writer standpoint, you're like the stakes are higher, and we talk a lot about the Daniel Craig James Bond series because I'm like, I don't know, I thought they were written really well, and I was just like, how do you constantly they up the ante with, like you said, and I agree
Yeah.
with. I mean, the action was still great,
Oh,
but
absolutely.
I just think
Absolutely.
the story just keeps getting better and better,
Yeah.
personally. But yeah, that's awesome. That's a great reference right there. I considered that before. So for that fifth one, so what do you find the biggest differences are writing science fiction compared to dystopian?
Yeah. Um, so the biggest difference, and I'll just like between like, my Lies of the Guardian series and my new Eclipse and the Fractured Orbit series, that is the first book in. Um, the biggest difference, there I didn't really do a lot of any research for Lies of the Guardians. It's futuristic. It's more, like I said, it reads a bit more like a fantasy book, but there's still artificial intelligence and whatnot. Um, which I mean I have a little bit of background in, but it's really a fantastical story more than anything. With Eclipse, I really wanted, not that it's hard sci-fi by any stretch of the imagination, but I wanted to make it believable. It's
Yeah, makes
there's
sense.
no there's there's no faster than light technology. There's no um it's we're not getting to aliens or anything yet. It's we're colonizing the moon, we're colonizing Mars, we're in space stations. I want it to have an element of realism to it, so I did a lot more research as far as what's theoretical, what's possible and that sort of thing. I mean, I won't claim that it's 100% accurate or by any means, but I looked at what are they looking at. We have a space program right now that's looking at colonizing the moon and going to Mars. So what are they planning? What concepts are they doing, and what's that going to look like? So I've got people living in lava tubes underneath the moon, because that's something that they're considering. I've got
Oh, that's cool.
looking at how space station gravity might work, and how how they might grow food, and that sort of thing. And none of it's really that um, it's all kind of baked into the plot. You know, I don't go into great detail about any of it, but I wanted it to have a semblance of realism to it. So, you know, when we're looking at it, you know, the two things that I kind of wanted to explore a little bit, you know, are very topical for what's happening right now, you know, space exploration and climate change. Um, so I did want an, you know, an element of realism. So,
Yeah.
you know, the biggest difference between the two really was, you know, the kind of amount of research I kind of did. Um, I listened to a lot of, you know, space podcasts and talks and whatnot because I mean I don't have time to sit and read scientific literature, unfortunately. So,
Amen to
so,
that.
you know, disclaimer, you know, there's some YouTube information in my, but you know, I try to get it from legitimate sources at least. So, but you know, a lot of that's cool. That stuff's always interested in me. You know, it's something that I put down for, you know, a couple of decades. You know, you kind of get out of high school and you don't have that free time to kind of, you know, listen to these cool things and whatnot. And, you know, it's been a while since I've had that free time. So while, you know, while I'm at my day job, you know, I can put on some background science podcasts and whatnot and find out what's happening and what they're looking at doing. And yeah, it's a lot of fun, actually.
I it's funny that you mentioned this. I don't know why I didn't consider sharing this with people, but that's what I've been doing. I have like this is where I came up with the term like historical urban fantasy because they have like the I don't like that. I was listening to a podcast and they're like, "Oh, the Lost Roman Legion." Now they think that it was actually a clerical error, and I'm like, so the one of the greatest historical mysteries of any time of where this like number two drafted like Legion went was, oh, they just like went to back to Spain and we just lost the paperwork in an empire that was known for its clerical, you know, accuracy. So I didn't like that. So I was like, I'm gonna put it with zombies. And being a history teacher, it's like I wanted to hit the Roman military history crowd pretty hard. And like you say, you know, even if it's not 100% accurate, I got to get certain things right, you know, otherwise
Yeah,
I'm not going to hit that crowd. And I feel like, you know,
yeah,
sci-fi particularly is really is like that depending on what you're shooting for. So I
yeah,
started listening to
absolutely.
different podcasts and different YouTube videos from some different professors and things like that. And I actually
Mhm.
did find some really good ones. I have one guy where it's only like 90-second YouTube videos, but he answers some really interesting and cool questions. And I just have saved all of them. When I learn, I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And I'll just go back, you know, when I'm ready for writing that book again and kind of go through.
Yeah.
I hadn't considered science podcasts.
Yep.
Duh. Like, why did like, I think you make a really good point there. You may not be able to do all the reading research, but we can all
Yeah.
definitely listen to that at the gym while we're walking to work,
Yeah.
while we're working, you know, doing chores, things like that. And I think that is the future personally when it comes to, you know, helping out authors to get that type of information.
Absolutely.
You're saying. So I think that's
Absolutely.
a great point there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because like you said, like, I mean, I don't claim that I mean, that this is a hard sci-fi, you know, series by any means, um, but yeah, you know, there's certain things, you know, okay, how, you know, how does the gravity actually, how's artificial gravity actually going to work? What can we do to, you know, even if it's just theoretical at this point, well, you know, what are things that people are looking at that we can do, you know, like, because you're living on the moon, you're living on Mars. It's not, even if you're not on a space station, it's not the same gravity that we have here. So how is, like, is this actually something that they're looking into, and is it something that's possible? Well, it's not possible now, but we've got some ideas. So okay, let's let's run with that. And at least, even if it's not something that's, I don't, you know, go on, you know, big explanatory ideas or anything, but if it's something's mentioned, I want it to be able to be like, okay, I know that someone's looking at an idea for that at this point. And
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
some things that are, you know, more feasible than other things in the book, um but that's sci-fi. It's fictional as well for a reason, right? So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And it's funny that you bring that up because, you know, I had talked to a buddy of mine. I'm like, I love like the planets, outer space. When I start to do research, like I just do like 2 weeks of research and I learn all these cool things, but I don't get a lot of writing done. But
Yeah.
that's what I wanted to do, things that are more realistic. And he goes, Danny's like, you love sci-fi, you love fantasy, you're good at writing fantasy, but you want to write a sci-fi. He goes, what was your favorite sci-fi setting or story? I'm like, Star Wars, hands down. He goes, it's a sci-fi fantasy. He goes, just
Yeah,
write that. So I'm like,
absolutely. Yeah.
that's genius. Like,
Yeah.
so, and it's funny that you mentioned that, and like I said, I'm kind of a
Yeah.
genre maverick. I tend to kind of go all over and,
Yeah, I would absolutely love to write a science fantasy, like a space fantasy. That'd be a lot of fun. But you kind of have to pick a lane, right? So,
yeah, it's
like
very true. Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of lanes
so
out there though. So
there absolutely are. So, yeah, with this series, I wanted it, I didn't want it to go the fantasy route. I'm okay if it's soft science fiction, but there is a line between, magic and tech that I wanted to keep on the science side. So,
yeah.
um, you know, kept in that route. Whereas, like I said, Lies of the Guardians tell it's a science, I call it a science fiction dystopia, but they have magical powers that affect technology realistically. Like there's some genetic component to it, but it's like it's magic really, like because it goes down that line.
Well, I like how you said space adventure. I was like, oh, that's such a cool concept that I had not like explored. I'm like, that sounds really, really.
Yeah,
It just sounds so good, and I like how
yeah,
you apocalyptic thriller too. I wrote that down. I'm like, those both sound really good.
yeah, with the space adventure, I'm trying to find that line too between the, space opera where it's not really going out to explore other planets and that sort of things. It's closer to Earth. They're in space. It's, Amazon will probably put it in space opera, but it's kind of not a space opera at the same time. I think if you like space opera, you'll probably like it, but um, my understanding of space opera is more, exploring other galaxies and other planets and
Yeah,
whatnot. So,
they're
um,
a hard crowd to them in military sci-fi. I feel like and certain
yeah,
romance caveats. Like they're not the people you want to tick off.
no, no, exactly. It's not. I mean, it's definitely not a military sci-fi. I mean, at the conference I was at this last week, they were talking about the difference between a militaristic sci-fi and a military sci-fi, where militaristic was more like Star Trek, where they're firing phasers at each other, but there's no like set command structure, where military sci-fi is more, there's a more structural component to how and
That
the
is
battles
interesting.
drive the plot. Yeah, so I mean, I know there's a lot of cross-genre readers as well, but
Yeah, yeah.
there's those that like to stick in their military sci-fi lane or the space opera lane, and but I think if you like space fiction, you'll like Eclipse. But yeah, just you don't want to brand it as something and it's
Oh,
not what people are expecting, right? So I kind of say that kind of what I have in as comparables, it's kind of like a Red Rising meets The Expanse. Like we're not going out of the solar system, at least early Expanse. We're not going out of the solar system. It's kind of more near future and that sort of thing. And Red Rising as well kind of has that dystopian element to it that there's a little bit more fantasy, I think, in Red Rising than what I've got here, but it's the same location at least. So yeah.
I was so mad. I met Pierce Brown years
Oh
ago.
really?
Yeah, with Patrick Rothfuss, Brandon Sanderson, Kevin Hearn, Michael J. Sullivan. Oh my God, there were so many cool authors there, and I on my old phone, apparently it didn't upload things right when I switched it over, so I lost my Pierce Brown photos. Gone.
Oh no.
Yeah, there was Brian McCullen was there. I had a couple photos with him and another author that I had to look up. But yeah, he was a cool
Oh
guy, man.
wow.
He was like he was just really neat. Yeah, he was definitely one of the coolest authors I've met. And you would not think
Cool.
he was just like, oh yeah, whatever, And he was like talking about my writing. I'm like, no, 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 no. I'm like, we're gonna talk about your writing, and then kept going that way. And he actually talked to me
Yeah.
about doing indie, which I at the time that's about
Oh
8 years.
really?
Yeah, but everybody there was like super, super cool. Um,
Cool. Yeah, I mean, that's one of my favorite series, and I'm so excited that he just announced two more books in that series because I absolutely love Red Rising, and the sequels, like, so good. Such good world building. Like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
uh,
definitely very epic. Well, I think that Amazon, I think we got out of this episode that Amazon has to add a space adventure
Yes,
genre for
absolutely.
you. But I'm thinking back though to how many people I've talked to who, sci-fi authors, and almost every one of them, even if we weren't recording, had said the same type of thing, and I definitely think that like I always say to people, like, well, how do you think they got those genres to begin with? Like enough people like the book,
Ask for it. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
ask
true.
for it,
That is
So
true.
I
Yeah.
think that's definitely should be on their docket for the future. Yeah,
Yeah.
space adventure would be a good one. Yeah, I would that would definitely be one of my favorite genres to look up.
Yeah, me as well. Absolutely.
All right, so number six, one of my things I really am anxious to ask you about. How did you go about putting your press kit together? It was really well done. It looks
Thank you.
great. Um, I didn't know if you were comfortable sharing, like a link to it or something like that, like a hyperlink
Yeah.
or something, so we could show people. That just was, it was a thing that came up that I was just talking to a buddy of mine about a while back, and we were actually trying to find a really good example, and it was really hard. So when you
Okay.
sent me yours, I like sent it to him. I was like, I found one, and he goes,
Cool. Very
wait
cool.
a minute. He goes, you didn't find it. That guy sent it to you. I'm like, well, either way, I found
Well, I wish I could take credit for the structure that I used for it. You know, I guess I created the press kit, obviously to reach out to people like yourself, podcasters and book reviewers and that sort of thing, because I wanted an easy format for people to be able to look at and
it
something to
was
stand
so
out a little
easy.
bit,
It
right?
was
So
so
I
easy.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, if people go to the link, I mean, it includes the book blurb, an author bio, the ISBNs, and my social media handles and all that. It's just a kind of press sheet to explain what the book is and where to find out more about it. So um, I first heard about a press kit actually, if people are familiar with booktube people, with from Jenna Moresi,
Hmm.
when I first started, looking at self-publishing. Because when I first started writing, I assumed I'd be trying to get a traditional publishing deal. Like I think a lot of writers do when they start writing. To me, I didn't realize self-publishing was an option, a credible option still, like even
Yeah,
in,
yeah, yeah.
2020, right? Um, and it wasn't until, and like I told you, when I was running, yeah, I mean, podcasts is how I get information about anything. So I started listening to a number of them, and she was one of the first ones that popped up on YouTube.
Hmm.
Um, one of her early episodes, she talked about putting together a press kit, for this very reason, to send out to people you want to showcase your book to. So um, she has one on her website, and I condensed it because hers was a little bit more than I thought was necessary. Especially when I print, because I print them out as well if I'm sending out arcs.
Oh, that's a
Um,
great idea. That's a great idea.
yeah, yeah. And then you can also include a little, like, you can include a personalized letter to go with it then, right? And it just someone gets it in the mail and they have a quick sheet of who this is, like, because I'm sure a lot of these reviewers are getting a lot of requests, so it's just something that's easy to look at and stands out a bit. And that was my take on it. Now the design, like I mentioned earlier, I have a background in web design, so like print design is not too far off. So I kind of took um I went to InDesign and kind of designed it up myself. But um, yeah, that's really the background behind it. Like, it would definitely, I won't take credit for the idea, but it took me a while to go back, because it was an older episode, so it took me a while to go back and find it.
Oh
I
yeah.
hadn't done it for any of my other books. This book I really wanted to step out. Like, I had a long release date, like a long pre-order period for it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure I'm getting it in the right people's hands. So yeah.
Well, it looked really good. I get so many
Thank
people,
you.
I get so many, especially on Twitter, like so many people wanting me to review books. And I'm like, you guys should have hit me up before the pandemic, because since then I'm like, I don't know. I went through this weird, like, now it takes me forever to finish a book. I used to, like, I think it's because
Right.
I'm pulled in a lot of different directions and stuff. And my
Absolutely.
friend
Yeah.
made a good point. He's like, well, you're writing like all the time now, or
Yeah.
always think about your writing. But yeah, so they send me all the time. But I mean, it looked really good, looked
Thank
really
you.
professional. I've seen a couple of them here and there that I've tracked down. I didn't really like how they were put together. But yeah,
Yeah.
yours was definitely the best one that I've seen so far. It looked really
Thank
good.
you.
So I would
Thank you. I
highly
appreciate that.
recommend. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna
Yeah.
definitely steal it, and I'll probably have to
Absolutely.
hire
I
you
stole,
to.
like I said, I stole the idea myself. So go
Well,
right
I'm definitely gonna hire you
ahead.
to double check it before I send it out, because I mean it was really good. Yeah, I really liked it. I sent to my buddy and he was like, "Oh my God," he goes, "We still have to do this for you now." I'm like, "I know, right?" I was like, "Why
Cool.
did we not
Cool.
think of this?" I think it was
Yeah.
like
Hey,
in my huge list of things to do. We just didn't really think of it. But yeah.
it's one of those things that's easy to, skip over, if, especially if you don't give yourself a lot of time in between when the book is done and publication date. Because a lot of my previous books, it was like, okay, it's done. I've got a week to hit, like, to upload it to Amazon and get it out. Because I think that's, it's a blessing and a curse for indie authors that we run our own schedule,
Yeah.
that we leave everything to the very last minute. And so when it comes to putting, stuff together, like a press release or something like that, it's good for, it's good for book reviewers, it's good for any local, media that you might have around, local
Yeah. Yeah.
bookstores and that sort of thing, is, who I'm passing these out to. um I think it's, it's just one, it's like I said, it's something you can look at quick, that, people, especially for people like yourself that are getting requests all the time,
Yeah.
that you can just look at it and know what it is, right? That
Yeah.
was really
Yeah.
the intent. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I definitely scored there. Um, Yeah, I didn't think about that sending out the bookstores. I'm definitely have to do that. But yeah, you mentioned that too, which is a great point. And this is where anybody listening, like I know people keep bugging me about my own books, which thank you so much that people are interested before you even know what they're about. Yeah, like you know, I was going through, I mentioned before we were recording, I was going through and cleaning up my website and doing some things. And I was like, oh, some of these I'm not going to finish for a while. So I was trying to update on things that I'm actually trying to get out within the next year, like for sure. And, but it was nice to have the ability to be like, okay, that's going to be on the back burner. That's going to be, I'm going to move this
Yeah,
one up, things like that. I
absolutely.
just, I don't know, like if anybody wants to, you want to pay me gobs of money, for my books, like I'm totally okay with that. As long as I get to write, and talk to authors like yourself and learn and have some fun and stuff along the way with the process. But I do like indie with the ability that I can just go onto my website and be like, yeah, this is gonna take a little while, things like that, or run a Kickstarter, for something,
Yeah.
things like that. But yeah, it's
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, we have so much flexibility too, and it's hard to stay on top of everything, right? Like, there's so many things that are great ideas, but I mean, we're only, usually, I mean, for myself at least, I'm only one guy. I can't do absolutely everything. So, that's, with Eclipse, I mean, we're recording this in November, and I mean, it comes out in February. I try to give myself a good few months to really, let myself prepare for this release.
yeah, yeah.
So,
And that's what I was
I
trying
do
to.
do those.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to tell people. Like I had some people that asked me like, "Well, why'd you do that?" And I was like, "I would like to rapid release." I was like, even if I
Yeah.
only got like 3 in a year, I was like, I would like to do things like you did, release a press kit and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
just be a little bit more organized.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and the goal for the fractured orbit series is that I do want to get all three books out in 2023. That's my goal now. I mean, it's too early to, I'm hoping I hit that. I kind of have to have some discussions with my editor, because they're booked pretty far in advance. I just found out, so it's gonna, take, it's gonna, things are gonna have to line up. It's not just my schedule that I have to consider. So, but the goal is to have all three books out this year.
All about those pesky schedules. That's
Yeah.
I'm really glad. Like, I'm glad I had the people on I did for season two, but I just felt bad for them. Like, the amount of problems that so many people had with that, and being backed up and things like that. That was another thing that for me, I was like, well, I had a couple people get back to me and I was like, even if I finished by like May this past year, I mean, the couple people I was looking at, it's like they wouldn't even be able to get to me till, you know, this upcoming year anyways.
Right.
I
Yeah.
was so backed up, which, I totally understand. So I was like, oh, it kind of worked out anyway on the long run. But yeah, press kit is definitely on my list now. It's very high up
Cool.
there
Cool.
now. So what is one writing tool you currently use and cannot live without? And then what would be one you would want to try in the future? It could really be.
Um, yeah, I think that the best, it's not really a writing tool, but it's more like I use Vellum to format my books.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh, well, that's what I'm talking about too, though. It could be like anything.
yeah, okay.
I guess I need my friend. He just mentioned this today. He goes, "You need to change that question a little bit." Yeah, it could be like, yeah, like formatting tools. Tool is like a really good one. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I think that's, when I think of, well, I think like there's two probably that like that would really make my life a little bit more difficult. Vellum for sure is one. It's a for those that don't know, a book formatting program. Um, it formats the interior of your book, and you can add images. You can add like, well, I got Eclipse here. So like these chapter headings, I can find one. Like I can add in these like my own
Hmm.
images and that sort of thing. But it sets the margins, it sets the page type, like the page
Oh, that's cool.
numbers and all that without a lot of effort. I think before that people were in InDesign and Word trying to move things manually around and
Yeah,
whatnot,
yeah.
or you pay a formatter, right? Um, Vellum just makes it so much easier, and it's a one-time fee that to me was a no-brainer when I looked at the cost of hiring multiple formatters over the course of your author career and doing a one-time payment. So
And
yeah,
then what happens when
um,
you're doing a special edition, or when you're trying to, or if
right,
there's something that's wrong, then you have to go and pay that person again.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I know, when my first book, I had gone through multiple rounds of edits, and my editor was like, okay, well, she made changes, and she's like, okay, and then you can send it to your formatter. I'm like, oh, well, I just used Vellum. It just does it. Like, I didn't have to do anything other than export the file again. So it really makes things simple. Um, yeah, and the other tool I use is Pro Writing Aid.
Hmm.
When I do my initial edits, I mean, I use a person editor, and I would never go away from that, but it gives me one. I call it basically another set of eyes to look over
Yeah.
my manuscript, because even if I don't agree with a lot of the changes Pro Writing Aid will tell me to make, but it forces me to read each individual line in a different way.
That's a good point.
And I find it super helpful to do kind of a final check before I send off to my editor.
That's really
Um, and then one that I would like to try. I guess that's a tougher one. I haven't done a lot with um
could be like a writing style too, point of view.
yeah, yeah. Oh, point of view, like a writing point of view.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't done a lot of like first person writing.
Mm.
Everything I write, other than that, than my one short story, has been third person. That's kind of just
Mm.
what I'm accustomed to writing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, so I mean, I don't do a lot of first person writing. So I mean, that would be something that I'd look into doing in the future for sure. Yeah.
That's been mine currently, and I'm like, oh, did I make the
Oh yeah.
right decision?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I like to write multiple point of views, and as a reader, it drives me, I find you have to be really skilled to pull off multiple point of views in first person,
Yeah,
because it's
that's the
too
problem.
easy for your author voice to kind of creep into a
Yep.
first person. So I've read some great books where it's first person, even if you're flipping per chapter. I find that sometimes you're like, whose head am I in now?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, because they're both you're getting both their thoughts, and it's sometimes really hard to get your own thoughts out of their heads.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I've been
Yeah.
trying with my Ogres and Overlords book. I was like, oh, I want to do first person because I feel like I have certain things I think are better conveyed in first person.
Hmm.
But I do like having four POVs.
Yeah.
And that's the problem I found is I'm like, and they're not. I'm like, I might just go back to third person
Yeah.
just to
Yeah.
go. But I like certain books in first person, like the Dresden Files and
Yeah.
Iron Druid Chronicles, Patricia Briggs, Mercy Thompson, Alpha and Omega. I just think I like that particular genre for first person, but
Yeah.
I also like multiple POVs. I like how Patricia Briggs does it though. She only does like two or three max, and that's what Kevin Hearn
Yeah.
does. But they do them really well, and that's my problem is I'm not. So
Yeah, like I'm not saying it's like impossible to do, but definitely it's hard to do well, I think.
yeah, for sure.
So when I started Eclipse, I think I started like you, I think I started first person, and I realized, no, this, especially as the series goes on, like Eclipse only has two, but the sequel's going to have at least three.
Mm.
and it might, we'll see where it goes from there. So it just it enables me to allow the character's voice to be their voice and the narrator voice to kind of, you know, flow through the entire novel. Yeah.
Yeah. We make another good point too is sometimes you're thinking it's going to be this one, and if it's not working, my friend was like, well, try third person for a few, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, maybe that's, maybe it's a third person book. I don't know, like sometimes you can't fight the wave.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I'm definitely gonna have to check out Vellum again. It's definitely that was another one that was on my buddy and my list. He was like, it really seems like
Okay.
something that we need to invest in. So I'm actually glad you're like one of the oh my gosh, maybe like 3 out of like 7 authors I've interviewed in the
Oh, really?
last like several weeks who has said that. So every time someone says something like that and it's been multiple people, I
Multiple
tend to try to
people.
listen. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's, and that's why I went that direction to begin with. Everyone was like, well, you gotta try Vellum. And sure, yeah, sure enough. Yeah, it it just makes that one step of the process so much simpler. So yeah.
I feel like as an indie author in particular, any money you can save, on the process helps you with the product, and particularly the time, that, I mean, there's like,
Absolutely.
I don't think a lot of people realize, like, when you have like, let's say you have a cover artist, an editor, and then a copy editor, it's like, that's already like a lot of people, and not saying you don't need those people, but ends up being a lot of people, particularly when
Yeah.
you're post pandemic and, everybody's,
Yeah.
trying to get caught up with past projects and things like that. So I think anytime,
Hmm.
you can streamline the process and make it still look professional. I mean, yours looks great. So
Right. Thank you.
clearly
Thank
that's
you.
something to check out. So really like that header.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, the header. So the header I designed in, Photoshop, and then I, was able to import it into Vellum and yeah, set it up that way. Hmm.
See, I feel like like for me, like one tool I'd like to learn, which I guess it's not a writing tool, but like Photoshop for me just seems to be like just keeps popping up with little things like this where I'm so tired of having asked my buddy, like, hey, can you Photoshop this for me? And
Right.
he's like, yeah, no problem. He'll do whatever. But I'm like, I just want the ability and to have the skills to do it whenever I want. Cause I just think there's certain things like, if I just keep playing with it, I'm trying to like retrain myself on a couple of different things, like with digital art and stuff like that, so I can practice myself. So maybe one of these days I can streamline the process and do my own covers, or maybe my
Right.
own advertisements or something like that, just to help out. But yeah, Photoshop,
Yeah, like, and I mean, you don't probably don't necessarily need even Photoshop for that. Like, I use Canva for, things like Facebook ads
that's
and that
another
sort of
good
thing as
one.
well. So that's a good one to look at. I mean, Photoshop can be pricey for if you're just using it for a few little things here and there.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I'm fortunate that, I do use it for work.
Mm.
So I mean, I don't have that added cost to use it, but really a lot of like what I did with my cover, I probably could have done in Canva. It might have been a little bit more, moving things around a bit, but Canva can do actually quite a lot these days, especially if you're not manipulating the graphics, if you're just kind of layering them, and
Yeah,
you can do quite a bit with it. Yeah.
that's a really good idea. I'm gonna write that one down too. Cool. So we'll go with that last one there. Do you have any news, updates, current promos, or projects, anything like that you're working on?
Yeah, so well, I mean, right now my main focus is getting a sequel to Eclipse done. Currently where I'm at, I've, like I said, a third to halfway done the draft of that. I do have another project I kind of have on the side that
Oh
I
wow.
haven't really shared yet. It's kind of a more fantasy project.
Oh,
So we'll see kind of where that goes. But yeah, there is kind of I haven't announced anything with that yet, so we'll see where that comes along.
oh, that's cool. That's super
Yeah.
cool. You're doing what I'm doing. That's what I was saying to my buddy. I was like, Herman's doing what I want to do. I was like, you're like over here a little bit, over here,
Yeah.
that way. I'm like, I feel like that's how you get the best fish to bite, and writing the stories that you want to write, and and go from there. So I think that makes
Yeah,
total
it's raining in the ideas, right? Like, I mean, we've got so
yeah.
many ideas, and it's sometimes hard to just, rein them in. I've got, like I said, I've got this other project that I kind of put aside to force myself to finish this trilogy before before I release that. But there is a good number of words in that project, so I'll be excited to release that and more news about that when it gets closer to time. I've got a cover for it.
Oh wow.
Yeah, but I haven't said anything about that yet. So
Oh wow. Well, that's super cool. Well, I look forward to that. Make sure you tag
yeah,
me or send it to me somewhere,
will
so I
will
can
do,
pull that up.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's super cool. We have to have you back on for season 3 to talk about that once you can discuss more. And I look forward to that. I'll make sure I write that in my notes. That way I could circle back to you. That's super cool.
Absolutely.
I
I'd love
just
to be on
want
again.
to remind our audience just once again that, people like Herman, really anybody that we have on here for the most part, really make sure you're going, checking out their links, checking out the description. Please make sure you're checking out their websites. If you have read something or listening to, one of their books on Audible, just please make sure that's what we're really stressing for season 2. Please make sure you're leaving those reviews. I would love it if people could just keep doing that. It really helps my friends out. That way we get more stories and I get more books and book news and can continue to talk to people, and feel really good about, the books that are coming out for them. Herman, thank you so much for coming on. Like I said before we started recording, if there's anything I can do at all, to help you out, if you're like, oh, I don't want to bug me, just use my email whenever. That's going to be one of the things I send out a little email blast is like, hey, everybody needs to start sending me more things, so we can share them. But if there's anything else I can do
Awesome.
at all, to help you, before this eclipse releases or after, just let me know and in any way, shape, or form, and I will help you to the best of my ability. So
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me on. I've
anytime.
really enjoyed it. It's been a lot of fun. I've
Yeah, I got
like
like a
talking
lot
to
of
you,
notes.
and well, I'm glad. I'm hopefully I can help, and I mean, I look forward to sharing your podcast as well, and letting people know about it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Anytime you want to come back, you just let me know anytime you got anything, and we'll set up
Wonderful.
a date and a time, and we'll get you on and have another good chat. So
Very cool. Most appreciated.
yeah, not a problem. Well, good luck with Eclipse, and I hope you have a
Thank
good
you.
rest of the night, and I will talk to you later, my friend.
All right. Thanks. You as well.
Later. Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.